Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today we have Christopher Chambers. He is the director, he's the writer, and he's done many different roles with this film and many other films. This film is called Aram Aram, and they aired this film in Fresno at Fresno State a couple of weeks ago, and the people loved it. So first of all, let's start by welcoming our guest, Christopher Chambers. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
As we're talking, you're in Montreal at a film festival. So what's going on over there?
Yes, we're here at the closing night of the Montreal Film Festival. It's our first time. It's our Canadian premiere, and we had almost a full sold-out audience, which is impressive because we had two screenings 2 days in a row, and we had a really great reception from the audience here. So it's really been an honor to be at the Montreal Film Festival. We're just pretty much wrapping up our film festival tour.
Tell us a little bit about this movie, Aram Aram. What is it about?
Sure. Aram Aram is a film that's set almost entirely in Little Armenia in Los Angeles. And it's the first American-made indie film set in that community featuring 100% Armenian lead actors. And it's the story of a boy named Aram, who's an Armenian boy who's actually originally from Burj Hamid in Lebanon. And he's sent to America after a family tragedy to live with his grandfather, who's played by Levon Sharafian, a great Armenian actor. And in that community of Little Armenia, we follow this boy as he struggles to adapt. And certain things happen to him, and he starts to fall in with the wrong crowd. And it's a story that could take place in Little Armenia. It could take place in Koreatown. It could take place in Little Italy. It's a story about a kid who falls through the cracks and he's trying to adapt to his new life.
And I was going to tell you that it sounds like a story that can be replicated in different cultures with different communities. I mean, here you have a kid growing up in a different country coming to the U.S. and, what happens to him while he's in the U.S.?
Sure. So basically what happens to him, I don't want to give away plot details because I don't want to ruin the movie for all of your fans who are listening. But basically something happens to him, which actually happened to one of my best friends in real life. And it changes the way he feels about the communities that he lives in and the ethnic groups that he lives next to. And he does what every child does, which is they look for a father figure. They try to find somebody to follow. And his grandfather is a very busy man. He's running a shoe repair store. He's older. He doesn't know how to raise a kid. And so what happens is another character comes into the story, and he starts to influence Aram and starts to take over the way he thinks. And that's sort of the downward spiral of what happens to Aram. And the question becomes what's going to happen with his relationship with his grandfather and what's going to happen to him.
And, you actually wrote this, you actually directed this movie, but the one thing that I noticed about your background is you've done a lot of the background work, behind the scenes work in film. How has that prepared you for this role?
Yes. So I've had an interesting background that I've been working in film since basically about shortly after college. So I started as a camera assistant working on all sorts of independent films and crazy horror films. And then I went to the American Film Institute and I studied cinematography. And I started working as a cinematographer on independent films and music videos. And then in 2010, I started directing full-time. And since then, I focused mostly on television promos, a little bit, and commercials. So I've directed over 5,000 television promos. And what that allowed me to do was, one is because I was involved at some point in almost every side of the process, I knew how to shape an indie film in a way that gave us a chance to really focus on what was important, which is not the technical things that slow down most independent films, but in fact to focus on what's important, which is the actors. And so that's why we spent a really, really lot of time focusing on our auditions and finding the right actors and real Armenian actors. And then when we were filming, I basically have my own method, which I learned through being on other film sets, which I believe gets the best performances from our actors.
One thing that's interesting about this is usually when people make films about ethnicities, they come from that ethnicity. Here you are, you've made this movie about the Armenian community, but not necessarily just the Armenian community. The actor in the film comes from Burj which is in Lebanon, and the Armenian community in Lebanon. But how do you know so much about this community?
Yes. Well, actually, so the story is it functions on two levels. So it's actually a mixed family, which is much more of a modern phenomenon. So the grandfather's side of the family is actually Hayestansi, while the mother's side of the family is Beuta High. And so the basic backstory would be that the parents had met originally in Armenia. And so basically, I did a lot of research into Armenian culture and Armenian immigration to America. And at the time when I started that research, there was a lot going on about Armenian crime in Los Angeles. And I started to notice that there was a pattern that the origins of, say, organized crime and Armenian crime in Los Angeles is the same origins as every other generation of immigrants in America. It's not about people being bad or good. It's about good people trying to figure out a way to defend themselves, and somehow that gets twisted and exploited. So then when I noticed there was a connection between that and the other immigrant groups, like my family, who immigrated the previous generation, I thought maybe there's a story we can tell that's really unique and special that we haven't seen before in American movies, but also can resonate on a bigger level.
You know, one thing I've been promoting this film, by the way, just for the record. I've been telling my friends to watch the YouTube videos. I've been emailing the YouTube video, and there's a constant comment that everybody's saying, and they're kind of pleased that it's not about the genocide, because, you know, the Armenian films traditionally have to do with the genocide. There's a new movie coming out actually funded by the late Kirk Kerkorian regarding the genocide, and your film is a little different. And I thought it was interesting that people were telling me that, you know, we're glad that they're doing this film because it talks about Armenian life today and not necessarily about what happened in 1915. Now, I want to just say for the record and the audience members, what happened in 1915 is very important. It's a dark period, but here you have a film that's a little different. Any comments on that?
You know, that's a very interesting point. We were just at the Montreal Film Festival today, and a woman asked me at the end, she said, I noticed that in our end credits, I as a filmmaker, I wanted to have a note at the end saying thank you to the Armenian community of Los Angeles and those members that helped support this film and helped to advise us, and also with respect to and honor to the survivors and the victims of the Armenian genocide. And she said, why did you put that there? Your film has nothing to do with that. She was a non-Armenian woman. And I said, you know what? My film doesn't literally have anything to do with that. It's a modern story. But all these characters wouldn't have come from where they came from, and they wouldn't have their backstory had it not been for the events of the genocide and how that triggered a diaspora movement. And so it is between the lines of our story. And to me, I have such respect for the people in the community that I've met while I was doing research and went through the filming. And I know how important the genocide is and how important it is that eventually our American president acknowledges it, which will come one day, that I just wanted to say a little note to acknowledge it, because I'm right now actually wearing the forget-me-not on my shirt, because I try to wear that or the Armenian flag to every film festival, just so somebody who's not Armenian can ask me what it is, and I can help to share that message a little bit.
And for our audience members not familiar with the Forget-Me-Not flower, this year for the 100th anniversary of the genocide, you know, the community wore the Forget-Me-Not flower as a Forget-Me-Not for the genocide. But Christopher, one thing, in making this film, a lot of work had to have gone into it. Now, and the reason I say that is, you know, I've been involved in radio for a very long time, and behind the scenes, there's so much that goes on. And I was just, you know, we were chatting in the studio with, you know, one of the guests who's here in the studio as well, about how much work goes on behind, you know, the technical stuff. For a film, I imagine for a radio, it's a lot of work. Talk about the background work on a film.
I would say I'm getting exhausted just thinking about it. So we are basically hitting year 2 of this film. Not the beginning of when I started to write it, since the beginning of prepping to shoot it. And it's a really, you know what, because you care and with all your heart, these things can be very, very difficult because every time you have to make a sacrifice, it really hurts you because you want to do justice to the story. And there's so many logistics involved, from the technical side of keeping your characters in focus to the artistic side of getting great performances, realistic performances from your actors, to the simple technical issue of getting sound that's clear and doesn't have a siren over it or a bus going by in the background. So all these things are happening all at the same time on every take. So you're basically battling Murphy's Law and the elements every single take and trying to capture one moment that hopefully feels real, even though it's completely fake. So it's really if you don't have the passion for it, you're not going to make it, because it's really difficult, but it's also incredibly rewarding to see that work on a screen in a dark movie theater and to see us have that experience to share that. That's when you know it's worth it.
So we're going to go ahead and take a look at a scene here. It's a scene that has to do with pigeons, and so it's about a minute long. And so once we air it afterwards, can you tell us a little bit about this scene? So we'll be back.
Sa taga, sa menak, ay kakan anu ahunik dari nepelorosh. Kan ahunik oknets hay nakapetin ichevadal ararat sarigagatin. Yebdranov nor shunch, nor kyanktavets, te martkutsiana, yev teken tanakan ashkari.
And we're back. Christopher, can you tell us about that scene that we just saw? It had to do with the grandpa and the grandkid with pigeons. What was going on there?
Yes. So one thing we wanted to have in the story was to have a grandfather that engages his kids through creativity, through telling stories in the beginning of their relationship. And so what this is he's trying to use a metaphor to explain to him that everything's going to be okay, that just like in Noah's Ark, the pigeons guided them to a new land and a new beginning, maybe also for Aram, his new life in Los Angeles will be a new beginning, not the end of his life. And for me, this is one of the most wonderful parts of the research period, which started in 2010, which is I met a man who raises Armenian tumbler pigeons. And he has a very tough life. He immigrated here from outside of Yerevan. But whenever he sees his pigeons fly, his heart is lifted. And so I spent hours with him drinking coffee and listening to him tell me all about the pigeons. And I took pieces of that and I added it to the film just to try to get this added level of kind of a metaphor. And because the pigeons are just so beautiful, I just couldn't resist. They're so beautiful.
What is your goal with this film? I mean, we have a large Armenian American population, and a lot of people are going to come see this film, I believe, that are non-Armenian as well. But what is your goal with this film? I mean, you could have taken this film and you could have substituted the word Armenian with, like you said, Korean American, Mexican American, German American, French American, but you didn't. You chose the Armenian American. But so what's the end? What's the goal?
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, our goal, and I think I speak for actors as well, is to tell a good story that has authenticity and has great acting and performances in it, so the audience can get pulled into an emotional experience. That's number one. And I think that's the number one duty of every storyteller to begin with. You have to engage your audience. Otherwise, it's just boring and you're writing an academic paper, a thesis. And the second thing that I hope for this film and that I've seen from this film is that people want to talk about it afterwards. And what's really interesting to me is that people will connect with the themes, which I can't really get into because it kind of ruins the story for you if you haven't seen it. But the themes that are relating to family, relating to, say, immigration and identity in America. And I've noticed that people don't just leave the theater after this. They usually hang out in the lobby afterwards and start talking. And something really interesting has started happening. And this was not what I thought was going to happen, but I'm so humbled that it has, is people start sharing their stories about, as non-Armenians watching the film, saying, you know what, I didn't really know anything about Armenians, and now all of a sudden I realize I connected with these characters, and now that I want to talk to somebody else about that, about what they learned about the culture and about their own experiences. And there's somehow a connection happening between the non-Armenians and Armenian culture just by sharing. And it has less to do with our film than our film just starting a conversation. So to me, that's something bigger than our film, and that's very exciting to see that started to happen.
We're jumping around topics here, but before I continue, I want to just let our audience members know that for those of you that are watching this on Comcast 93, AT&T 99, the CMAC television channel, you're seeing pictures, and those pictures are of our very own Christopher Chambers, but also there's a shoe store picture that we'll have Christopher tell us about a little bit, and then there's an on-set picture that you're watching. So all these pictures that you're seeing are relevant somehow to the movie. So, Christopher, I want to ask you, our audience members are watching this broadcast on television. They're seeing these pictures. There's a shoe store. Is that the shoe store where the film took place?
Yes. So like I said, that the grandfather character played by Levon Sharafian is a shoe repair store. And in Los Angeles, almost every shoe repair store is owned by an Armenian man who's an immigrant who usually has a classical music background. And just like Arsène, the grandfather in the story, does. And what I did was during the writing of the film, I went into these shoe stores and I would meet with and have conversations with the owners. And as usually happens, if you sit down to have a conversation with an older Armenian man, it's a 3-hour conversation. The cigarettes and the coffee come out, and you're hearing amazing stories, sometimes terrible stories too, but really interesting lives that they've lived. And so I would go home and I would kind of take that information and try to make the script more unique and rewrite those scenes. And in the end, we ended up shooting in a shoe store owned by a really wonderful man named Jack Hakopian, who was a wonderful family. And he's a lot like Arsène. He emigrated from Yerevan. He happens to be a classical trained musician. And he was very, very helpful. Without his support, it would have been impossible for us to afford to shoot in a real location like that. And we wanted authentic locations, so it was a real blessing.
You mentioned earlier Murphy's Law, and for those of us in, the broadcast business, Murphy's Law, when you're least expecting it, things will happen that will kind of throw you off a little bit. But how important is it to I know this term is overused, but stay the course. How important is it to stay the course? Because, when you're dealing with actors, you're dealing with a live production, there are things that can come up that will bother you, that'll disturb you. But, you're done with this movie and you've worked on movies in the past. So how important is it to stay the course?
It is so vital. I think even more important is to step back and to stay when you step on set every day, to say, I know something didn't even think could go wrong is going to go wrong. And so I'm already ready. Bring it. And I'm going to adapt, and we're going to find out. Maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe we have a creative idea that will come from that. But I guarantee you, every day of this shoot, there have been some curveball coming my way that I just never anticipated. So, and not because of lack of preparation, just because that's the nature of Murphy's Law on a film set. There's so many things that have to go right for a scene to work.
So I'm sorry to cut you off there, but before we go into the next scene that we're going to show, it's a scene where the young actor comes into the store and the grandfather kind of gets mad at him. Before we show that, I want you to tell us about October 2nd. There's a big day coming here, and we're recording out of Fresno State today, but next to Fresno State, there's the Maya Cinemas. There's something happening there on October 2nd. Why don't you tell us what that is?
There is something extremely exciting happening. So we've been touring around the world with this film right now. We started with a sold-out premiere at the Los Angeles Film Festival. We went to Yerevan for the Golden Apricot Film Festival, Montreal Film Festival, St. Louis Film Festival is coming up. And now we're going to be bringing it out into theaters. And we decided to start with our red carpet premiere October 2nd at the Maya Cinemas Fresno, which is right next to Fresno State. We're really excited. We're going to be in there for a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe more. If people want to see the film and people show up and people say we want to see films that take place in different communities, then they'll keep running it. And after that, we'll go to Glendale, October 16th, opening at the Americana Theaters. And then we're going to East Coast starting in November. And I just talked to somebody today in Montreal about maybe bringing the film to a theater in Montreal later in the year or beginning of next year. But we cannot wait to come back to Fresno because the people we met when I went up there for the sneak preview asked the best questions. They were the most engaged audience we've ever had. So I can't wait to come back.
So October 2nd, everybody's welcome. I mean, it's a red carpet event, so you'll be there. I presume there'll be some stars there as well from the film. Is it open to the public?
It's open to the public. I'm not sure how many tickets will be available, but if you can't get a ticket that day, we'll be running 4 times a day the whole week. And we're going to have Ala Tumanian is coming up, Levon Sharafian is coming up, Sevag Tateosian, who's a first-time actor who plays a very important role, is coming up, and the boy who plays Aram, John Sevag Rohinian, a very talented young actor. They're all coming up, and they're very excited to premiere the film in Fresno.
Let's watch this scene now.
Տեսարքոդ նոր ընկերոջդ։ Ինչ էի կանում։
Չեմ գիտեր, աներ։
Այդ բան անուն չունի այդ տղա։ Պապդ որ քեզ հարց է տալիս ու նորմալ պատասխանի։
Left your hoodie in my... We all right here?
Ասեմ ինչ նորմալ է։
You all right?
Ասեմ նորմալ է ամեն ինչ։
Տղան իրա տեղն է կարա պատասխանի։ You all right? All right then. See ya.
Welcome back, Christopher. Tell us about that scene. You know, the kid comes in late, I presume, and the grandfather gets mad at him. What happens in that scene?
Yeah, this is a very big moment in the film because what you have is you have a boy who's lost, who's stuck, who's torn between 2 father figures. And for the younger, the more thug-looking actor, Sevag Tateosian, for him as an actor, it was very intimidating because he had to go head-to-head with Levon Sharafian, who's a legend. He's a legendary actor. And it was very hard for him to do that. He had to really, really get into the mind of his character. And this scene is just very important because it's a turning point. What this film is about is the psychology of a 12-year-old and how 12-year-olds make the wrong decisions and how they seem like the right decisions to them. And I feel like if we can understand his character, then we can understand kind of different cultures. We can understand how other kids make the wrong decisions in life. So that's what the scene is, and it's a very dramatic scene. We have a lot of really great scenes that are really dramatic and leading to a really big climax. So hopefully it's a good ride for the audience.
You know, one thing I wanted to ask you about, so the film, when people watch the trailers, and, you know, my wife is this way too, she watched the trailer and she said, you know, this is going to be an emotional film, I believe, in just watching it for about a minute or a minute and a half. Is it emotional? I mean, has the audience been emotional at this thing?
Yes, we can tell if the audience is engaged in the film because we can hear them. Because basically, we have a small film about people that builds to a really big climax, and at the end, there's a big emotional moment, and it's a kind of emotional moment where people will be in tears at the end. But it's not the tears of misery and depression. It's kind of what you would call catharsis, which is sometimes there's another kind of tears that, for me, when I see those movies, I feel good. So that's what we're going for, is that full spectrum emotional experience. And you'll have to let me know when we come to Fresno if we pull it off.
So what is next for you? I mean, I know that you're, well, I shouldn't say I know, but writers and directors, especially writers, though, they're always working on something, whether it's authors that are working on the next thing or film writers or screenplay writers, they're always working on something. So is Christopher Chambers working on something else?
Absolutely. When I was in Yerevan between interviews or between screenings, I was back in my room writing. I'm basically been writing 3 different scripts because you have to have a bunch of different pots on the stove when you're trying to make a film because anything can happen. They can fall through at any point. And so I have one script particular, which I'm really excited about, which I hope we can go into production with next year. But I can't talk anything about it because I'm a little bit superstitious about talking about something that hasn't been made yet.
I completely understand. But, one of the things also, you hope to get it in production next year. But stepping back, I want to ask you about investors. I mean, look, a film, even a low-budget film, is expensive. You've got actors, you've got food, you've got all kinds of things that you need to, props, you've got rental of space. I mean, are there investors that invest in these films, or how does that work?
Yeah, basically there's two general ways that people raise money for independent films. One is through grants and film foundations, and that takes multiple years. You have to become a part of that organization. You have to go through the workshops. And frankly, I don't have the patience for that. If I did that, I wouldn't have made the film yet. The other is to be resourceful and to look at, say, what are ways that I can raise money? Until you prove that you're a known quantity that can make their investors money, it's really, really difficult. And you have to just take that risk. And you have to find people that believe in the project and they want to take the risk and they know it's a risk. And it's really, and whether you're Spike Lee, who sold tube socks, he was very enterprising. He did anything he could. Or Stanley Kubrick, who went to his uncle to get money for his first film. Whatever you have to do. In my case, I didn't do it that way. It was much more, I used a lot of resources that I had from my own company because I had been making a lot of television promos. Mm-hmm. So I was able to have equipment that we had bought with the intention that I would use it in the film. So stuff that I had tailored designed for my company to use for work, and then knowing and hoping that it would be exactly what I needed for the film. So any way you can do it in this era, there's no better time in the entire history of humanity to make a film. Not necessarily to get it shown, but to get it made, because the means of production are so low. If you have a good story with good acting, it doesn't matter what kind of camera you use. Use a Canon 7D or a T2i or a 5D. Use a $500 camera, something you can afford that has real lenses on it, and you can make a film for very cheap if you have the passion to pull it off.
So we're running out of time this week on the program. We've got just a few more minutes, but, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to talk about October 2nd again. And, not if people can't make it on October 2nd, then Maya Cinemas is going to be showing this film, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they are so excited about this film, and that's one of the reasons why we're opening there. We could have opened it at Edwards River Park as well. But Maya Cinemas, I went and visited the theater. It's state-of-the-art theater, brand new, and they're really supporting this film, which basically means they're supporting films that feature stories from communities that don't normally get stories told about them. So this premiere, to me, is actually bigger than us. It's really about, if Maya Cinemas sells out the tickets and has a successful run, then they're going to want to support future films from the Armenian community and perhaps other communities.
Well, and
to me, that's great.
And San Joaquin Spotlight, we have a lot of non-Armenian American viewers. I mean, this is a program that is what's going on in the community. We are going to be interviewing a author that's going to air a little later on about a book that he's written about his family, surviving, basically. So why should non-Armenians, and you've got a few seconds, Christopher, I hate to put you on the spot, but why should non-Armenians come watch this film?
I'll tell you why. If you're like me and you're tired of seeing the same Hollywood sequels over and over, and you love seeing a movie that you can relate to with details about a community that you want to learn about, and you want to see something different, you're going to love this movie. That's all I have to say. If you're a non-Armenian.
There you have it, folks. Christopher Chambers, the director, the writer. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff in his career. In his young career, he's done a lot of stuff with movies. The movie is Aram Aram. It opens October 2nd in Fresno with a red carpet event at Maya Cinemas. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Thank you to the volunteer crew that made this production and every production possible. We could not do this program without you. For our audience members listening to this broadcast on 90.7 KFSR Fresno, thank you for tuning in. For those of you watching this broadcast, thank you for watching Comcast 93, AT&T 99. Christopher Chambers, thank you for making time to come on the program from Montreal at the Film Festival. Very impressive.
Thank you for having us, and I'll see you October 2nd.
Sounds good. That's all for this edition of the program. Tune in next week to a new edition.